Welcome to our third session of tatting. Today we're going to talk about adding beads and split rings, which involve doing the reverse double knot. Now the things you're going to need are your two shuttles, you're going to need some thread, and we're going to be putting it on a little differently. You'll want your beading needle, or in my case I actually lost mine, so I took a twist tie and took all the paper off of it. And I'm going to use that to put all my beads on. And then you'll also need your beads. I'm going to take this thread here and give myself some extra because we're going to end up putting the beads into the shuttle. Just going to put on the beading needle, and then I'm just going to thread the bead on. Now, the first one might have some difficulty getting on. You can just kind of wiggle it around, but some of the beads have a little smaller holes, so there are extras in there if you need to switch out a bead. Put on all the beads that you're going to need for this project. And we're just playing around here for practice, so I'm just going to put a couple beads on. But you want to put on all the beads that you want in your project on now, because once we get started, you're not going to be able to add any more. So now that I have my beads on here, I'm just gonna work them into my shuttle. So I'm gonna just every so often put a bead in here so I don't have all of them in my way as I'm working. And that would be if I'm going to be just working with the one shuttle. We'll actually be working with two, so I'm actually going to end up using a lot of thread for the second shuttle. So I'm just going to leave the beads where they are right now and thread that through, thread through. Do a little slip knot here and start wrapping my thread here. So when you start a project using a pattern, it'll tell you how much thread you need and what kind of way you're going to be doing it. And if it says two shuttles with this amount of thread between them, this is how you would set it up. So you would put about half on each of them. I'm only practicing, so I don't really need a whole lot on each side. And then now I'm actually going to tuck these in, and I'm going to put them all in the same shuttle. It would depend on your pattern whether or not you need them in the same shuttle. But everything I'm going to be doing is going to be off this side. So now I've got my two shuttles loaded with beads and I'm ready to start. And what I'm going to do is just put one down and start. My beads are already right here, most of them. So I'm just going to keep tucking them back in. And I'm going to start with a loop just like before. We're going to make one of these. And to review, out of the way. And to review, you just start by holding your thread like that. I actually need more thread for what I'm doing. And see, these beads might end up getting in our way. You kind of flourish under, go through, up, over, and around. And then you want to flip the knot. There, we've flipped our knot for our first half of our double knot. Then we're going to go from this side, down, under, through, and you want that one to flip as well. So there's our first double knot into our stitch. Remember, it wants to slide. And then I'm gonna continue making this first circle. You can play with it. You can do a number of stitches, any number. You can throw some picots in there if you'd like. I'm just gonna do our usual of 3, a picot, 3 picot, 3 picot. So now I'm going to do a picot. Remember, picots are done by starting out just like before, but then once you've flipped your knot, you're going to leave some space. You can measure that space, or you can just guesstimate, and then finishing it off with the second half of your double knot. Now I'm going to do 3 more stitches. And to manage the beads, I'm actually going to take a whole bunch of thread and move them down in. I'm gonna put all these in here and wrap thread around them. So that should keep them out of the way for a while. And just like before, you just tighten up the loop by pulling it. And there we go. We've got our first loop. Now from there, we're going to end up doing our split ring. So you start a split ring, much like before. You're going to do a loop, and you're going to do half of the amount of double knots that you need. So here I was doing 10, so I did 5. You could do 8 and 8, or you could do like 8 and 8, 6 and 6, whatever size you want to do. And you do them just like regular. Make sure to get that tied up to the spot. Now that I've done my stitches that I'm going to do into this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm going to take and basically just drop my shuttle over here. Now, from like tutorials I was watching, they were having you hold it very strangely, but I found if I just kind of turned it a little bit and then held it this way, it was a lot easier to work with. And this, we're going to be doing a reverse double stitch, very similar to what we were doing before, but you're going to start from this side. So we don't do the flourish part first, we just do this side first. And you don't want to flip your knot this time. So bring that in tight and make sure it doesn't flip. So now we're going to do our flourish, just like before. And then drop that in, over, through. And once again, do not flip the knot. And now we've done one of the reverse double stitch. I'm gonna go back to going down through that way. Do not flip the knot. And then this side. And that way, do a little flourish up and under through. Up and under and through. So then once you do that, you're gonna pull the side that you started your loop on, and there we go. We've got 4 and 4 on each side. So then I'll show again, starting it. I'm gonna start here with the one that I just already have. You can do either side. We're gonna make our loop. And do the whole thing just like it was before. Down and under, and flip these. Make sure it's tight. Oop. There, I dropped my shuttle. Down through and out, and we flipped it. We have a single stitch. Flip that knot. There we go. And flip the knot. There we go. So it can get a little confusing at this point because you have to remember if you're flipping a knot or not. So just remember your first half you want to, your second half you don't want to. 3, 4. We'll do 5 this time, just increasing it by 1. We're gonna switch with shuttle we're on. Turn it so you can comfortably hold it. And then we go from this inside. First, don't flip your knot. Make sure it's tight up there. And then flourish under and through. Do not flip that knot. On this side and through. Do not flip. Under, through. Through. 3. And then, oh. And there's our split rings. So split ring again, you just start with your loop, just like you would any other, and do your double knot, just like before, flipping them. However many you need to complete for each side. And then switching which shuttle we're using. I give myself a little more space to work in too. And reverse double knot. So a reverse double knot, you start from the second half of a regular double knot. And then you don't want that to flip. You just make sure to pull it tight here and look, it flipped. And I was doing all that. Now I have tried to flip it back, and it's just really hard to flip it back. So usually it's best to just undo it and then try again. Down through, and then pull it tight. And then go under and through and pull it tight, making sure it doesn't flip. So there's our first stitch. And you can make sure that it's worked by pulling that thread once again. And like here, I let it flip, and now if I pull on it, it stays knotted. So I want to undo that. And there we go. So then I'll just pull it. And it's good. Now you could go into a chain, just like we did before, or you can go into just single loops by themselves. That's what I did over here when I started doing the beading. So I put the beads down there pretty far, but I want them back now. So I'm going to take a couple, 3 of them, put those back in. And we're going to do a loop of its own to start out like before. So we have our 3. Now we're ready to add a bead. So I'm gonna just release it into our main string here. And I'm gonna hold it here next to the stitches. And we're going to do just like any other double stitch. Make sure it flips. And there we go. We've got our bead and it's put into our work. So you'll see how the bead is encased in the string here. So then you would just finish that stitch up with your second half of your double knot. And there we go. You can also give them a little more space, which I will show in the next one. We're ready to add our next bead. So then I'm just gonna get it here from our collection of beads. And then I'm gonna put it in here and do my stitch just like we normally would. Now, if you wanna give it some space, you just do like you would do for a picot. So I've left some space in there, and you could use that if you're going to connect a piece, and then you do your second half. So there we go, we've got some space. And when it is finished up, closed up, you've got that thread there. I'm gonna do a couple more knots. So to finish this one out, I'm gonna just do my last one, showing that again inside of our picot here. And you do your first half, make sure it flips. There we go. And into that, your second half. There we go, it's encapsulated in there. And I'm gonna finish out my loop. I'm just ready to pull my thread and tighten it up. And there we go. Now, say you want your thread to be on the other side. There's a different way to do those ones. So see how there's no thread on the outside of these ones? I will show that in another loop. So I'm going to start another loop here. So we want our beads to be available to us. I'm going to grab my 3 here. And we're going to actually push them all the way so that they're inside that loop that's going to go around my hand. I'm actually going to leave them out here so that they're not in my way as I'm working, and I can grab them as I need them. So just going to do some knots to get us started. We're ready to add our bead, and we're going to just pull it in from that back side and then do our knot just like before. Make sure it flips. And then the second half. And there we go. So I'm going to do a couple more stitches and then throw in another bead. So we're ready for another bead. I'm just gonna pull it through and up into our front, and then we just do a double knot. You can give it space once again, but you really don't need it from this side of them. It would actually kind of stick out more, and they look pretty good this way. So I wouldn't suggest it, but maybe you have a pattern that would call for it. And then you do your second half. And I'll just finish this one out to give us some symmetry here. And once you get your loop done, just like always, we're gonna pull it tight to finish that off. And you can see the beads are on the outside there. So you've got the outside ones and you've got the inside ones. It just depends on what your pattern calls for or what you're trying to design. So now that we've learned those two skills, we'll be doing our last session, which will be our following a pattern. What you'll need for that is your thread in this. You don't need to add beads, but if you did want to add beads to it, you can. You just want to try to plan it, figure out how many you need and where you're putting them. And then you'll need your pattern that I gave you guys. And you'll want to also have your scissors available for the end and a little bit of glue, because that's how we'll finish it off. If you need any help with any of the skills we've talked about here, you can contact me with the information I have in the description, and we will be meeting one last time in 2 weeks. So we'll see you then. Good luck.